Welcome again from me, Dave Coates. This time, the material from me provides the introduction to Cathy's material, and we are both talking about transport, or more properly, physical distribution. There are again two parts to this week's material. The first part is about the different modes used in physical distribution. In other words, there will be comments about road transport, rail transport, sea transport and air transport. And in particular, we will think about why one mode of transport might be used rather than a different mode. The second part is about load planning, and specifically about how to use lorries effectively when a single lorry has to make deliveries to multiple locations. This week, it probably makes most sense to start by working through the PowerPoint slides, where there are a number of scenarios for you to think through. Hopefully, you can quickly see answers to the different questions, but as last time, you might want to think about those scenarios in your coursework groups. The first scenario is about rail and its use within retailing. There is then a chance to think about the supermarket giant Asda and its use of Teesport, a port in the northeast on Teesside for importing goods. There is also a scenario about exporting from Morocco on the north coast of Africa. And finally, there are two scenarios where the emphasis is on trade-off. Again, I would ask you to work through the questions rather than just read the words and rush on. The word notes on Learn then have some details about the different modes of transport, and the book by Rushton et al. Has many more details for those who feel they want that depth about the different modes of transport. In the notes on Learn, at the top of page 6, there is a table which illustrates the sorts of decisions that retailers are routinely making. How do I get my load from here to there? To support these thoughts and to support the details in the word notes, there are some links on Learn covering, firstly, containers, the normal way to send large quantities of goods over large distances. Secondly, port-centric distribution. And you might think through the ways in which port-centric distribution is a good idea and the ways in which it is a bad idea. And that's essentially what is meant by the words critically analyse in an exam question. The final set of links on Learn are about freight trains from China. Freight trains have been coming to Europe for several years, but only recently have freight trains from China started coming across the Channel to the UK. Freight trains from China to Europe provide a third alternative compared to using ships or using air transport. Overall, the aim is for you to have some knowledge about the various transport modes and hence to be able to critically analyse the appropriateness of different modes of transport. For example, the winter 2014 exam asked, analyse the extent to which rail is a realistic mode of transport for retail distribution within the UK and for the supply of goods from beyond the UK. Moving on to the second part, load planning is about routes and schedules so that the right products are delivered to the right places at the right times. Part of load planning is recognising the constraints, and there are details about the constraints both in Rushton, chapter 32, and in the word notes. And part of load planning is about the details of which lorry goes where. And there are examples of this in the word notes. For the simple example in the word notes, you might usefully decide to sketch a map of the various locations, as before, so you can picture the problem. This time, the arithmetic is simply about how far do we travel, adding up distances, but also remembering the lorry has to go back to the depot or warehouse at the end of the day. For the first example, there are simply deliveries to be made from Loughborough, the depot, to Nottingham and Derby, and I have completed this example for you. For the second example, there are deliveries to be made from Loughborough to Leicester, Nottingham, Derby and Birmingham, and you should work through this as laid out in the word notes. Together, these examples illustrate the savings method of routing and the value of being able to make multiple deliveries using a single lorry. However, you should also be able to suggest reasons why making multiple deliveries using a single lorry is a bad idea. The final example in the word notes is rather larger, and a picture of the locations of the customers is given in the file Picture for Load Planning example on Learn. This example again illustrates the saving method and gives the 4 routes or allocations for efficient delivery to the 13 customers. Using the information on the order sizes for the different customers, you should check that the routes are feasible. That is, check that the total of the order sizes is less than the capacity of the lorry. Check that the total load all fits in the lorry. And doing that should highlight to you the fact that load planning for companies is often a daily occurrence, as changes in the order sizes will lead to different load plans to ensure that the lorries are never overloaded, to check that the loads are always feasible.